Now, a high burden of tuberculosis and multi-drug resistant TB has also amplified South Africa's HIV epidemic. But despite all of these somber statistics, government finances close to 80% of the HIV response and provides more than 4 million people with life-prolonging antiretroviral treatment. It wasn't always the case, though. It took years and years of activism and litigation before South Africa eventually took a leading position in responding to the HIV and AIDS pandemic. Justice Edwin Cameron is an outspoken activist, and in 2005, he wrote the book Witness to AIDS that details his personal journey of stigma, of infection, and of triumph. He joins us now on this World AIDS Day to reflect on many, many things. Good morning to you, Justice Cameron. Thank you so much for your time this morning on the AM report. It is a different World AIDS Day this year. 2020, it's also the year of course, COVID-19. I suppose the question is, has the addition of the COVID-19 pandemic set us back in our fight against the HIV and AIDS pandemic?
It certainly has, Michelle, and good morning to you and your listeners. It set us back in some ways, but I think the AIDS epidemic and our national response to it also offers us lessons for COVID. So just to talk about what you've raised now, we certainly know that some people found it impossible during the lockdown to get their treatment. Very difficult. I have had access to my treatment because I got my pharmacy to deliver it. Most people in South Africa can't simply phone up a pharmacy and ask them to make a delivery at their front door. So we did have cases during COVID where people could no longer access their treatment, where they went off their treatment. That was a huge impediment. On the other hand, I think there were profound lessons in AIDS which should continue to inspire us during COVID. The one is that we had to pull together as a country. The second is that activism was extremely important, civil society input, and that remains an important lesson. And then lastly, Michelle, I'd mention that the harsh response to AIDS that many people wanted, and which is still maintained in much of Africa, was in fact implemented during COVID. We used the criminal law, we locked up people, we beat up people. In Alex, there was even a person murdered because of allegedly not complying with COVID regulations. So regrettably, we didn't properly digest the lessons from the AIDS epidemic, which is that this is a public health issue. We've got to pull together. To destigmatize it is the best way to ensure that everyone gets treated.
And I mean, it's not a case even in 2020 where we can talk about stigma and HIV and AIDS as a thing of the past.
Unfortunately not, Michelle. If I may be personal here, it was 21 years ago that I spoke out about myself, not just as living with HIV, but as someone, as you mentioned in the intro, that has survived AIDS. And why? Because I had the privilege of access to antiretroviral treatment. And I was also making a point about stigma, which is that stigma silences us in this epidemic. It impedes access to good prevention messages, to good treatment and good counseling, and simply to life-saving interventions. And I thought at the time that I spoke out more than 20 years ago that I'd have many other people joining me. And that has not yet happened. We know, as you said earlier, that we have 7.5 million people in our country, a fifth of the world's entire AIDS burden, living in South Africa. So this is not an uncommon thing. Most of your viewers have family members, cousins, brothers, sisters, parents, children living with HIV or AIDS. And yet we are still burdened by this enormous question of shame. It's not just external discrimination and ostracism, which is the external stigma. It's also the shame that too many of us still feel about a matter which is not a matter for shame at all.
I mean, I was discussing this issue with an activist in our preparation for this World AIDS Day. Just some of the other challenges that are emerging as we commemorate this day, Justice Cameron. The issue that came up in my discussions with this particular activist was, when do you tell a child who was not able to get the treatment that now prevents mother-to-child transmission is now a young man or a young woman, perhaps a teenager as well, who is HIV positive, but that has not been communicated to them as yet. That's just one of sort of the challenges that communities are dealing with now. How do we address an issue like that?
It's such a good question, Michelle, because I acquired HIV through sexual contact, and 95% of cases are through sexual contact. But we have a whole cadre of youngsters, and two of them are part of my family. They were people at Sparrow's AIDS Orphanage, Andy Morobi and Prince Motswari. And both of them are youngsters now, brilliant, beautiful young people who were born with HIV more than 25 years ago. And they are on an open campaign. Prince has made an advert which has been flighted on public channels to conscientize people and to make them aware of this. And the answer to your question is that you should never not tell that child. You should tell that child as soon as the child can speak. You are special. You have this. You are on ARV treatment. This ARV treatment is being taken by many other people. So the answer to the question is, don't make this a terrible, burdensome, shameful, dark thing. Put the light on it. Put the light on it early and immediately.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the issue we were just discussing just a moment ago, and that's the issue of the immense stigma still.
Correct. It's the same. And of course, Andy Morobi and Prince Motswari are fighting this. You can find them on Facebook. You can find them on social media. And you can contact them and they will come and talk at your organization or in your community or in your congregation. So the one answer to stigma is to talk about it. Say, we are so many people, no need to be ashamed, no need to be fearful, and definitely no need to tolerate any form of discrimination.
Yeah, absolutely. Justice Cameron, you know, this morning we have this event that's taking place at the Iterileng Clinic in Soweto this morning. Deputy President David Mabuza there will be delivering the keynote address. We're always wary of these sort of ribbon-cutting events when it comes to things like 16 days of activism, no violence against women and children. The same applies to an event or a commemoration like today, World AIDS Day. I mean, that appointment, chairperson of the South African National AIDS Council, the Deputy President occupies that role, but it is a political appointment. Should we see more of our activists who are really at the coalface of the pandemic, of the epidemic here in South Africa, in a position as chairperson of the South African National AIDS Council?
I don't have any difficulty with the Deputy President chairing the National AIDS Council, Michelle, and that has been the case since it was founded some 15 years ago. There is a civil society sector within the AIDS Council, together with the government sector, business sector, other sectors, healthcare sectors, but maybe it's not active and visible enough. But you're making a more important point, which is that the ribbon cutting is a good start. Don't diss ribbon cutting. You've got to have the leaders there. You've got to have Deputy President Mabuza there. But then it is also up to us. We as activists, we as community members, we as people who care about women, about children, about rape, about HIV, about stigma. We've got to take it further from there. And that's what happened with AIDS. Zaki Ahmed went out when the drug prices were too high. He started the treatment action campaign. He got people to march in the townships and the suburbs and the cities. And when President Mbeki was resistant to reason on HIV and AIDS, he took him to court. And the Constitutional Court ruled that President Mbeki had to start making treatment available. So that's the kind of deep community-based, suburbs-based, don't diss the suburbs either, community activism that we need on all these issues.
Absolutely. Justice Cameron, thank you so much for your time. As always a great pleasure talking to you here on the AM Report. Justice Edwin Cameron, former Constitutional Court judge, as I'm sure all of our viewers will know, talking to us today on this 1st of December, World AIDS Day.